You need to hear this if you're a gardener. Welcome back to the Celtic Farm. Now, there are few things more satisfying than nurturing a garden, watching as tiny seeds sprout into vibrant life. And just as we care for our plants, we must also tend to the soil that sustains them. That's where composting comes in, a truly magical process that transforms kitchen scraps and garden waste into what I call gardener's gold. But like any craft worth mastering, composting has its nuances. Over the years, I've encountered my fair share of composting conundrums, mistakes that can turn this beautiful dance of decomposition into a smelly, sluggish affair. But worry not, fellow gardeners, for I'm here to guide you. Today we're diving into the 7 deadly sins of composting, those common pitfalls that can hinder your composting success. By understanding these mistakes and learning how to avoid them, you can ensure your compost pile thrives, transforming organic waste into a rich, earthy treasure for your garden. Let's get started. I bet you didn't know how crucial the balance of greens and browns is for composting. A healthy compost pile is like a well-balanced meal. It needs the right proportions of ingredients for decomposition. Greens are nitrogen-rich elements, the energizers of the compost heap. These include kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, and grass clippings. Browns are carbon-rich components that provide structure. These are drier materials like leaves, paper, and cardboard. Aim for a ratio of 2 parts browns to 1 part greens. This balance is optimal for microorganisms breaking down the matter. Too many greens and your compost can become a soggy mess. Too many browns and decomposition slows down. Together, greens and browns create a harmonious balance for composting. I don't think people understand how crucial aeration is for successful composting. You see, just like us, those microscopic decomposers need to breathe. Depriving them of oxygen is a surefire way to create a smelly, stagnant compost pile. Turning your compost pile regularly is akin to giving it a good lungful of fresh air. This simple act introduces oxygen into the heart of the heap, rejuvenating those aerobic bacteria that are the workhorses of decomposition. Think of it as fluffing up a pillow. Over time, the materials in your compost pile will settle and compact, squeezing out the air pockets. Turning the pile loosens everything up, allowing air to circulate freely. Now, how often you turn your compost depends on the size of your pile and the time of year. During the warmer months, when decomposition is at its peak, aim to turn it every 1 to 2 weeks. In cooler weather, you can get away with turning it less frequently, perhaps once a month. A well-aerated compost pile is a happy compost pile, and a happy compost pile means faster decomposition and a richer, more valuable end product for your garden. You need to hear this if you're a composting enthusiast. Our third sin is a bit like overindulging in a single dish at a feast. It might seem appealing at first, but it can lead to an unbalanced and ultimately unsatisfying result. I'm talking about overloading your compost pile with one type of waste. Just as we thrive on a varied diet, so too does a compost pile benefit from a diverse range of materials. Adding too much of one thing, be it grass clippings, fallen leaves, or even kitchen scraps, can create an imbalance that hinders the decomposition process. Imagine a thick layer of grass clippings piled high in your compost bin. While rich in nitrogen, this dense mat will prevent air from circulating, creating a soggy, anaerobic environment where decomposition slows to a crawl. The key here is to strive for diversity. Mix those grass clippings with drier materials like shredded paper, cardboard, or dry leaves. This creates air pockets, allowing oxygen to reach the heart of the pile and encouraging those beneficial microorganisms to thrive. Think of your compost pile as a melting pot of organic matter, where different ingredients come together to create a rich and flavorful end product. Variety is the spice of life, and it's certainly the key to a healthy and productive compost pile. You need to watch this if you struggle with composting. Now, our fourth sin is a bit like inviting unwanted guests to a garden party. Just as certain characters can disrupt the merriment, certain materials can wreak havoc in your compost pile. I'm talking about adding those problematic items that can attract pests, introduce pathogens, or simply refuse to break down properly. Meat scraps, dairy products, and oily foods are best left out of the compost bin. These tempting treats can attract unwanted visitors like rodents and flies, turning your compost pile into a buffet for pests. Diseased plants are another no-no. Adding them to your compost risks spreading those pathogens to your garden, potentially harming your precious plants. It's best to dispose of diseased plant material separately, either by burning or sending it to your local green waste facility. And while it might seem counterintuitive, some things simply don't belong in a compost pile, even if they are technically organic. Pet waste, for example, can contain harmful bacteria and parasites that can contaminate your compost and potentially spread disease. Stick to the tried and true. Fruit and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, yard waste. These are the staples of a healthy and productive compost pile. By avoiding those problematic materials, you can ensure your compost remains a safe and beneficial addition to your garden. I bet you didn't know how crucial moisture is for your compost pile. Just as we need water to thrive, so does a compost pile. Neglecting moisture levels can disrupt the balance of this microbial world. Think of your compost pile as a thirsty sponge. It should be moist but not waterlogged, like a wrung-out sponge. Too dry and microorganisms become dormant. Too wet and it creates an anaerobic environment leading to odors. Check moisture by feeling it with your hand. Squeeze a handful. It should feel damp but not dripping wet. If too dry, add water gradually. If too wet, add dry materials like straw or shredded paper. Find that sweet spot where microorganisms can thrive. Regularly check and adjust moisture and your compost will reward you. Our sixth sin is a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of modern gardening practices. While chemicals and pesticides might seem like quick fixes for pest problems or nutrient deficiencies, introducing them to your compost pile is akin to poisoning the well from which you draw life-giving water. Remember, composting is all about harnessing the power of nature to transform organic waste into a valuable resource for your garden. Using chemically treated plants or materials in your compost can introduce harmful substances that disrupt the delicate balance of this natural process. Pesticides, herbicides, and even chemical fertilizers can linger in your compost, potentially harming the beneficial microorganisms responsible for decomposition. These chemicals can also contaminate your finished compost, putting your plants and the environment at risk. The solution is simple. Embrace the principles of organic gardening. Choose natural pest control methods and rely on organic fertilizers to nourish your plants. By keeping chemicals out of your garden, you ensure that your compost remains a safe and beneficial addition to your soil. Remember, a healthy garden starts with healthy soil, and healthy soil starts with a chemical-free approach to composting. And finally, our seventh sin is perhaps the most forgivable, for it stems from a place of enthusiasm rather than neglect. It's the sin of expecting instant results, of wanting to rush the natural rhythm of decomposition. Composting, like gardening itself, is a process that unfolds over time. It's about patience, observation, and trusting in the wisdom of nature's cycles. Don't be discouraged if your compost pile doesn't transform into rich, dark soil overnight. The time it takes for compost to mature depends on a variety of factors, including the size of your pile, the materials you've added, and the weather conditions. Some piles might be ready in a matter of months, while others could take a year or more to fully decompose. The key is to be patient and consistent with your composting practices. Turn your pile regularly, maintain the right moisture levels, and keep adding a balanced mix of greens and browns. Over time, you'll begin to see the transformation taking place. The materials will shrink in volume, the texture will become crumbly, and that earthy, sweet aroma of decomposition will fill the air. Remember, good things come to those who wait, and the rewards of composting are well worth the patience and care you invest. Why are there not more people talking about the 7 deadly sins of composting? These common mistakes can turn this beautiful dance of decomposition into a sluggish, smelly affair. But fear not, fellow gardeners, for by understanding these pitfalls and taking steps to avoid them, you can ensure your compost pile thrives, transforming kitchen scraps and garden waste into a rich, earthy treasure for your garden. Avoiding these 7 deadly sins of composting will help you create a thriving compost system that enriches your garden soil. By balancing your greens and browns, maintaining proper aeration and moisture levels, and being mindful of what you add to your compost pile, you can produce nutrient-rich compost that supports healthy plant growth. Happy composting. Remember, every garden, every compost pile is a journey of discovery. Embrace the process, learn from your experiences, and enjoy the satisfaction of turning waste into wealth naturally.